Hi and welcome to another episode of Rerouting Logistics, hosted by myself and Beverly Bell. And in today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Scott Robertson, who is the owner of Haulage Hub. And we'll be discussing a very interesting topic around AI, automation and technology within the logistics sector. So over to you, Beverly.
So Scott, it's lovely to talk to you this afternoon with Aspian Logistics. Slightly unusual because today I want to talk to you about lots of modern things, which is not necessarily what the commercial vehicle industry is known for. So in my briefing, I was told that you have a digital freight marketplace.
That's correct, yeah.
It's not a phrase that easily comes to mind to me. Can you just explain to our listeners what that is?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks very much for having me here today. So, digital freight marketplace is essentially a digital freight platform that shippers and large 3PLs can actually use it to subcontract and advertise their load opportunities, where then other transport companies and hauliers can actually see and view the loads and basically take and do the jobs for them. So effectively, it recreates and challenges the traditional subcontracting industry that's traditional within the industry.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that, Scott?
So the business is just coming up to its 4th birthday, actually. So we've had 3 very successful years where it's continually grown. It's grown sustainably. And throughout that time, we've obviously grown our haulier base quite considerably, and we've got some very large, very well-known customers, which consist of large 3PLs and also some household brands in terms of manufacturers and shippers. And our overall haulier base has grown quite considerably as well. More recently, we've come up with a couple of industry partnerships, most notably with the Road Haulage Association.
Just before we go on to talk about that, just tell us a little bit about your background. Are you a natural, transport person? Is that what you did when you were a little boy? Did you say, Mummy and Daddy, when I grow up, I want to work in the commercial vehicle industry?
It's a really interesting question, actually. So I actually grew up around trucks and diesel. So my dad had a very small transport company from when I was born, to be honest. I sort of always remember him talking about transport and trucks and working in the industry. So
you got diesel in your veins.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So my dad had a small business. So a maximum of 3 trucks. So that was very much in the 90s. And one of the sort of things I can kind of remember actually is when growing up is my dad would always try and say, right, boy, whatever you do, you're not going into transport. And yeah.
So what did you do after you left school?
So after I left school, I did my first degree in business studies, and interestingly, whilst one of the areas that I really liked about the course that I chose, I actually had a placement year, and the placement that I actually applied for was actually working within the commercial team at Eddie Stobart's. That got me into transport by default, as it were. So it was
Your father was delighted.
He was actually, yeah. He was really, really pleased for me. Obviously, it was very different to probably.
Sorry, go on.
From sort of the transport that I sort of grew up and sort of got interested in. It was very more analytical and commercial and strategy focused. So it was still within transport, but a very much different area.
So whereabouts in Stobart's? First of all, geographically, and then which department were you sort of based into? Yeah,
so whilst I was on my placement, I was actually my family home is from Northampton, so I grew up in Northamptonshire, and they had a depot at Crick. So that was my first office that I worked in, and that was in 2007, I think it was now. Yeah.
Okay, so you go from transport placement to digital freight. And which is your first love, the transport or the tech and all of the digitisation?
That's a tough question. Probably a bit of both, to be honest. I think what we do now, it kind of marries the 2 areas that I had very much interest in together. So after I completed my placement, I went back to university, and then when I graduated, I then worked in strategic consulting. An opportunity actually came back to work for Eddie Stobart's, where I headed up their commercial team. I did that for, I think it was about 4 or 5 years. And then I left there because there was a few opportunities that enabled me to set up my own business. So predominantly with focus on commercial strategy. And one thing led to another opportunity after opportunity, which got me more and more involved in technology. So areas around sort of implementing transport management systems. And then I think it was 2016, it might have been 2017, I met my now business partner, Craig. for many years I had an idea of streamlining the commercial process of actually sort of responding to tenders. So typically that was quite a long-winded task, a task that I was very much involved in whilst I was on placement, and then also returning to Eddie Stobart's. And I always sort of thought in the back of my head, there's got to be a better way of slicking this up. So met up with Craig.
So just tell us who Craig is. Was he somebody you knew? Was he a friend? Was he techie? How did you meet him?
Craig had his own successful software house for sort of 15 years. And I actually found him from an internet search. I can't remember if it was like either from like Google or LinkedIn. Basically, I wanted to sort of meet someone local who basically had a software house who could explore the what is now called Route Rater, which is the tool that we use to streamline transport tenders and the whole pricing element of responding to pricing requirements within the industry.
So you went to him with a proposition?
Effectively, yeah. I sort of took him, the idea of, I've got this idea of, can we create a tool that will streamline the process? And we did that very successfully. So it kind of took something that was, taking hours, days, even weeks in some examples of responding to a tender in terms of routing, then put pricing up through Excel and whatnot. The solution streamlines all that so much so that you can set some key parameters, go and make a cup of tea, and then the data will spin in the background. And then when you come back, you've kind of got your core elements of your transport response.
So did you then start to sell that to the sector?
We did, yeah. So it's a very interesting point, actually. You just reminded me of something quite funny, really. So we'd sold it to quite a number of large 3PLs who still use it to today. And we actually went to a meeting with a transport company based in the Northwest. We got there very early, and we actually went for a quick coffee beforehand. And it was actually then, I think it was in 2019 actually, I actually mentioned to Craig, I've got this idea about a digital freight marketplace. And it's from that point actually really that sort of the concept of Haulage Hub was born. And then sort of as we came back out of COVID, it really presented an opportunity to get the business going.
And the rest is history, as they say, although you're still a young company. Mm-hmm. So the transport sector's huge, wide, varied, tiny little companies, multinationals, multi-million-pound companies. Quite polarised, isn't it? And you've got some, maybe the more traditional, smaller companies that don't easily embrace the technology. And then you've got the others at the other end of the scale that will embrace it and it's part and parcel of everything they do. How do you attract those naysayers who say, no, I'm not doing that. No, I like a bit of paper. How do you sell what you're doing to them?
Yeah, it's obviously that's one of the sort of key challenges of being a business owner of getting your product and service in front of people. I feel like our sort of sales process has been very successful, and we've very much come from obviously the background in terms of key contacts and stuff where we can get opportunities to introduce ourselves and the like, and do presentations and showcase what the tool is, and we've been very good at that. We've then been able to sort of build case studies with the 3PLs that have used the product, and very much what we sort of found is that selling the concept to the traditional transport industry, it does come with some skepticism. And what we've found is that if we're given an opportunity to trial it, once we've got the foot in the door, the results speak for themselves. So it drives huge efficiencies for large 3PLs if they're looking to sort of replace their subcontracting processes or enhance
the smaller companies? The smaller companies that logically or historically would have relied on the subcontractor route. How do you get them to sign up?
It's actually what we view it as an opportunity of actually enhancing capabilities and possibilities for those smaller hauliers. So traditionally, if you look at sort of the large 3PLs, they'll have a team with a black book of sort of key hauliers that are utilised to do their subcontracting. What our solution does, it opens those opportunities up to thousands of hauliers. So hauliers would actually get opportunities that they'd never had before. And in addition to obviously working for 3PLs, they can actually work directly for shippers and manufacturers who historically they wouldn't actually have access to unless it was through either a large 3PL or through a traditional freight forwarder. Our solution breaks down a lot of those barriers, and essentially those smaller hauliers can actually access the better paying work straight away.
That's the point I was getting to. So they'll get work they wouldn't have otherwise got, and it might be more profitable for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And the other thing as well is obviously the way that the system works obviously uses AI and various algorithms to actually put opportunities that the system thinks that they'll want right in front of them directly.
It's a bit like Married at First Sight in Australia, where you put the algorithms together and you match them up.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it, yeah.
I've recently discovered the television programme, so that's why I thought I'd mention it. It is that matching up. So in terms of the matching up and then the work being conducted, you've got to have a team of people there to support your business, the Haulage Hub, which is clearly a successful business, but very young and still, growing a lot. What's the average age of the people in your business? How many people do you employ?
So in total, we've got 11 persons that work for us at the moment.
Yeah.
The eldest is myself at 39.
Yeah.
I think the youngest is 28, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not the typical age profile of people working in the transport industry, but it is of people working in I call it the tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
How do you attract people to work for you where you're doing both transport and technology? I guess it's the technology that attracts them rather than the transport. Yeah,
obviously, amongst the team, there's a few different areas that we have persons that work for us. So, finance. But in terms of, say, for example, the people that are coming in operationally, in terms of, like account manager and haulier onboarding, we have to have people that have got some understanding of transport and logistics. So people that have been on the front line operationally, whether that's in planning or subcontract management or haulier onboarding. But the key element of when we're looking for people, they've got to have a keen understanding and are enthusiastic about the technology being used to enhance traditional road haulage operations, to remove a lot of the historic inefficiencies that are actually in place. So yeah, that's the key bit there really, is that they've got to have a keen enthusiasm to sort of enhance the road industry.
Okay, and do they tend to stay? Do the staff tend to stay?
Yeah. I think overall everyone's very, very happy there. We very much have the ethos of trying to promote from within. We've tried to really create an environment that's very, very healthy. So we have the possibility of hybrid working. So some people are in the office for some of the time. They can be in the office as much as they want, and we like people to sort of come in at least 2 or 3 days a week. We also have where we sort of set up on the Daresbury Science Park. It's a real nice environment to work with. There's restaurants and Costa Coffee and gym, and we pay for like everyone's gym membership if they're a keen gym goer. I'm personally not, but we try and create as much of a healthy environment as possible.
And that's one of the main aspects, isn't it, of recruiting and retaining talent?
Absolutely.
And the challenge for that is, if you are the driver of the vehicle, none of that matters.
Mm-hmm.
What matters is the inside of your cab and your terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And so I was just talking before to Emily, who works for Aspian, who's 23. I'm sure she won't mind me telling the world that she's 23. And I was asking her how she came to work here. And she said she came into recruitment. She had no idea what logistics was. Nothing wrong with that. Millions of people don't know what logistics is. And her friends say, "Oh, do you talk to truckers all day?" But she says she loves her job and she really likes the diversity, different aspects of it. And, I would say that Emily, age 23, is probably a digital native in a way me, age 65, isn't. And you use this phrase of AI, and we know Sir Keir Starmer has recently said he's going to unleash AI, which is an interesting phrase, unleash. It makes it sound like some sort of monster where you're going to let it go. What's your view of AI as something that's going to revolutionise the transport sector, or something that's going to just assist it a little bit? Which is it?
I kind of view it as something that's going to enhance what we're doing at the moment. So particularly like in the short term. So I think using like our own solution, obviously AI can be used to tackle inefficiencies that have historically existed within the transport sector. So as you're aware, there's a pretty ugly statistic that 30% of all HGV miles are actually empty. So effectively one in 3 trucks you see on the motorway doesn't have anything in it, which is pretty terrible, really. So mentioning before about the algorithms. So our solution actually actively tries to match up those load opportunities with hauliers' historical empty legs. And we're matching that to effectively thousands of hauliers. So the traditional sense of subcontracting wouldn't enable to do that. It's only through technology and AI that allows those inefficiencies to be tackled.
Can you prove that? Have you got the statistics?
Yeah,
to prove? I'm not going to ask you to show me the stats, but you can prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the cool things about our platform is that we do have our own app, which integrates with various other transport management systems. So we can actually track where the loads are, where they've been, where they've come from, where they're going to. So we can actually sort of get a good understanding of what that empty mileage actually now looks like for the hauliers that are using the solution.
And so you use the AI to reduce the empty running?
Effectively, yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. So there's a few bits in terms of where the technology is working and removing the inefficiencies. So it's actually physically in terms of reducing empty running. But there's also quite a lot of back office tasks that have basically been streamlined through our solution, and that's right from this sort of place of creating the work all the way through to the admin, how PODs are managed, communication. So this system automatically sends messages. So ask for ETAs, flies happen. The ETAs are then updated in the platform. It can automatically send detailed messages about loading sites, restrictions, so on and so forth. So it kind of removes a lot of those instances where you're sending emails and picking up the telephone. So a lot of that is removed, and then right the way through to the end in terms of the invoicing process as well. It obviously reduces a hell of a lot of paperwork and that's involved in that.
Okay. What do you think will be the sort of symbiotic relationship between autonomous vehicles and an organisation like yours, the Haulage Hub, where there's the use of an awful lot of AI? Do you think, and I'll ask in a moment about 50 years down the line, but do you think there'll be a need for less human interaction? And the second part of that question is, do you see that reducing risk to other road users, or do you see it as increasing risk to other road users?
I think it's going to be really, really interesting years to come, between sort of like the short term and the long term. You mentioned about obviously in 50 years time. I think what will happen in the short term, it will be very much the case of where these opportunities are used as enhancers. So in terms of like autonomous vehicles, at the moment, I think we're still quite a few years away from that. But what I actually sort of see probably in the future is more and more of people and shippers and manufacturers using a solution like ours, where they'll basically load their load opportunities onto a platform, i.e. like Haulage Hub, and they'll then get matched to autonomous vehicle operators to do it. So I think it can.
So a container ship comes in. I live on the Isle of Wight. I see them come in and out on the Solent.
Yep.
Container ship comes in. It's unloaded at Southampton. How will what you're doing impact on that? You're saying there'll be an autonomous vehicle, it'll be loaded on there, and it's all done remotely in a way.
Yeah, that's how I sort of see it in the future. I think obviously, we're in a place where some of those roles that exist within transport will probably be will evolve. So say, for example, we do get to a place where it's autonomous vehicles. Essentially, from what in the wording, it's autonomous, so it won't have a driver. But would you still need someone that's sort of on board the truck to sort of ensure health and safety and the like? Obviously, you mentioned a moment ago about risk. Yeah, particularly in the short term, I think that will be the case. So whether it's someone that can take control or whether it's just a case of doing safety checks, I think it would be a case of where transport roles will evolve over the next few decades to come.
But I was talking more about, and it's, I think, not for me to say whether or not there should be a person in the vehicle controlling it, but in terms of the interaction between the shipper and the operator of the vehicle moving the container. Yeah. You're indicating that organisations like the Haulage Hub will remove a lot of the manual processes that happen now.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So do you ever see those shippers, well, how would you offer that service, how would you be paid for that service if there's a lot less interaction between the companies?
I think in terms of the way that we sort of earn our money at the moment, it's based on sort of small commissional admin fees anyway. So there's not like a subscription or anything like that that revolves around using it. It's basically all on a pay as you go. So we actually get a commission. So I'd envisage that when a shipper books a load on the platform, it would very much work in its traditional sense as it is now. So the way that we've sort of set it up, it is actually future-proofed. So we'd take a commission off of the shipper, and then we also have a retainer fee from the haulier that's actually doing the job.
Okay, interesting. So let's fast forward to 2075.
Okay.
It's 50 years away.
Yeah, hopefully I'll still be here. Yeah.
Well, you will, I won't. It's 25 years since I became a traffic commissioner, which is very scary. What do you foresee transport and movement of goods? I'm not going to ask about people, but movement of goods will look like in 50 years' time. Will it be, first of all, will it be better or worse? And how do you think it will look?
Yeah, I actually think it will be better. So for me, I think in terms of efficiency, for the end user is only a good thing. So obviously we mentioned a moment ago about empty running. So I think that we'll have a more efficient transport network in terms of reduced empty running.
So leaner and greener.
Leaner and greener, definitely. Obviously, we're going to see more and more electric vehicles come on the road. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are trialling them now. I still think there's quite a lot to be done in terms of the infrastructure that's placed around the country to basically make it something that's a viable solution. At the moment, my personal opinion, it isn't without that infrastructure improvements. So overall, I think it will be better for the end consumer. I think we'll probably see a lot more involvement as well in terms of probably some more and more last mile. So, particularly as sort of cities grow and become more pedestrianised, I think you'll probably see a lot more mix of HGV to sort of unloading areas and more last mile deliveries.
So delivery not necessarily to people's homes, like the lockers that you see at various locations. Because transport's really efficient now. I can, in fact, last night I ordered something on a certain online platform, and it'll arrive tomorrow. So already it's fabulous for the end user, for the consumer. I can go to the supermarket and buy what I need, and if it's not in today, it'll be in tomorrow. I'm struggling to understand how it will be better.
Well, for me,
or is it about? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that. When you talked about being greener and leaner, is it about the fact that it's the transport itself that will become better for the environment, but the end user won't actually really understand or appreciate that? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think it's obviously going to be greener, but when I talk about efficiency, I actually sort of see cost savings. So if we think of the traditional road haulage industry at the moment with the use of, like, say, tramper drivers and whatnot, the driver does his shift, then that truck isn't actually getting utilised for several hours whilst they sleep. I kind of envision that it'll be a lot more of a tighter, efficient network in terms of the truck will finish doing one job, it'll go charge, and it will then go immediately on to the next one. So by removing a lot of that waste, it should also remove a lot of cost. And in theory, the potential is some of that could be passed on to the end customer.
Already, the end customer doesn't want to pay. They just want to eat the yoghurt. They don't want to pay for it being transported. Yeah. And that's the challenge for the hauliers, isn't it? Because the profit margins are so tiny.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key bits that enabled me to sort of work with Craig to set this business up. So, going back to the start of the discussion, I come from a family that had its own small transport business, so very much understand the requirements and stresses and the like that goes with that in terms of the cost and everything that's involved in running a transport business and being efficient as possible. So again, it comes back down to efficiency. Our solution, or solutions like ours, will actually open up more and more opportunities in the short term to road haulage operators.
Okay. Well, if only we had a crystal ball and we could look at what 2075 is going to look like. You all know I never will. Maybe Aspian will still be here in 50 years' time and they'll play this and it'll all be very old and grainy and go, gosh, look at how
time capsule.
How things have changed. So I've asked you lots of questions, which you've answered beautifully. Thank you. You do get the chance only if you want to. It's, purely voluntary if you want to ask me anything, because you've politely answered all my questions. Is there anything you want to ask? Now's your chance.
Yeah, probably a couple really. So one of them's probably, how do you sort of envisage the sort of future over the next 5 to 10 years and sort of the embracement of technology?
5 to 10 years is nothing, is it,
Mhm.
in the overall scheme of things? My own personal view is that the industry is extremely polarised. You have some really young modern companies that are small, but they're early adopters of technology. And then you have others that are quite large organisations and they still like paper. And until you can win the hearts and minds of those businesses, those not just the leaders of the businesses, but the drivers, the transport planners, everybody, till you can get them to embrace the technology, I think people are fighting a losing battle.
Okay.
Because a lot of the transport sector is still so old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to our own IT support company the other day, and they were talking about the transport industry, saying how polarised it is in terms of use of technology.
Yeah.
But I'd be fascinated. I wish I was here in 50 years to see what it's going to look like then. I think it'd look very different.
I think you sort of mentioned like a real key bit there in terms of the resistance and the people embracing it. How do you think that we get people to embrace it? Is it through like education early on, or?
I don't think it's about education. I think it's seeing the benefits, tangible benefits, which is why I was asking you about what's the benefit for the haulier.
Mm-hmm.
The consumer's already getting a fabulous service. What's the benefit for the haulier? And if it improves their bottom line or improves the pay and working conditions of the people that are working on the front line, whether that's in a cab or whether it's monitoring or driving a cab from the comfort of a room, as long as you can get those people. The foot soldiers, I suppose, would be the phrase. I don't know whether that's the right word, but unless you can see a benefit for them, I don't think they're going to do it. Or they're going to embrace it. It's got to be, for them as well. That's my view. But what do I know? I mean, I just know about regulation. Although what we do in our consulting world is we try to make sure that we show people what the benefits will be to them of change. Because I agree with you that change is change is something people are often very scared of.
Yeah.
I've always done it like that, love. Why do I need to change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that we come across quite a bit. So particularly, if when we're sort of going back to what I was talking about earlier, we've got the foot in the door. We've obviously mentioned that the benefits and efficiencies that it can have, and then sometimes we then have to go through the process of then selling it internally as well to obviously the operators that have been doing the same process for the last how many years. And I think resistance to change is obviously something that's quite common when you ever introducing technology into any sector.
And I think the final answer to that question is, years ago when I was a TC, I went to a presentation by a vehicle manufacturer. I won't say who it was, but they were happily telling the audience, who were all very good operators, how the driver would be able to be watching his iPad and watching a film on his iPad while he was in charge of the vehicle. And everybody sort of put their heads down. I thought, oh my God, Beverly's going to ask him a question, which I did, which was, have you engaged with the regulators about this? Throughout Europe, not just in Great Britain. And he said, oh no, we never thought of that. He was serious. So I think for any change, there has to be early engagement with the regulators right across Europe to say, how can we make sure that this change isn't going to compromise road safety? That's okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for coming to Liverpool.